Well, it's time for something a little bit different, something that's a little bit off to left field. I always love checking out some quirky stuff, some different things, and sometimes it misses, sometimes it hits, and sometimes it's a little bit of a mixed grab bag. So let's find out what this one is.
Take this love, watch it die and darken.
Postcards from the Asylum by Jason Bieler and the Baron von Bielski Orchestra. I really hope I pronounced that one correctly. So, Jason Bieler and the Baron von Bielski Orchestra is obviously being helmed by Jason Bieler, and Jason is a guitarist, a musician, a singer, songwriter, who kind of their main claim to fame is with the Saigon Kick. This came out in like the early 90s and put out a handful of records right up until 2000 when they kind of called it quits. He also had a little bit of time with I believe it's called the Super Transatlantic, not to be considered or confused with Transatlantic, the big super group with Mike Portnoy, Neil Morse, and the rest of the boys there. During that time, he put out one solo record called Houston, We Have a Problem in 1998, and then 20 years later came out to Where Dreams Go to Die in 2018, and then kind of restructured, rejuvenized, and came out with the first album from the Jason Bieler and the Baron von Bielski Orchestra with songs from the Apocalypse. And, 2 years later, here we are with Postcards from the Asylum. Now, this is the first time I've ever actually heard Jason's work, so I don't really have anything to compare it to. And I think that might be one of the better ways to approach this album because there's a lot going on. If you're looking for what I kind of term the mixed grab bag type of an album, this is really it. You're going to get a little bit of a flavor of everything in this case. And in that case, when it hits hard, it hits really hard. But when it misses, oh boy, does it miss. So, this is an interesting ride. Now, the album itself is, the music itself, as I mentioned, is a little bit of a mixed grab bag. The overall flavor is of a rockish tone. You've got that hard rock flavor that we've been getting within the past 5, 10, 15, 20 years since, the 2000s when we didn't quite know what rock wanted to sound like. And so we're just kind of getting the ephemeral idea, the ethereal idol of rock. And I feel like this is kind of in that same kind of vein. Listening to this music, you're not really hearing anything starkly new. You're not hearing a genre bending, genre blending, genre breaking style. It's just fun rock music. And that can really be exemplified within, I would say, the first two tracks of this album, Bombay and Numb. And these two tracks are my two favorite tracks off of this album. So it's a good thing that they start with this because it's a little bit of a rocky show after that. But Bombay and Numb open up brilliantly. They've got this drive. There's this little bit of like a menacing about it. And everywhere that I look, I get the same kind of quick elevator pitch for this band in this iteration. A post-apocalyptic troubadour with a panache for sonically grotesque. That's a good enough description for these first two tracks. They've got this quirky aspect, a little bit of a darkness to it, a little bit of a grit and grime to it, but it's always got this polishing veneer that's got how in steampunk, how everything kind of has this grit, this grime, but underneath a lot of that, there's this really nice shine that's going on with a lot of the metallic work about all the aesthetics that we have going on. So it's almost like this contrasting of the grit and dirty of the Victorian era, but this clean and shiny and optimistic ideas of the future that they have. And that's kind of what we've got within these first couple of tracks. Bombay starts off with that drive, that force, that momentum on it that you can't help but grab onto. It's very modern in its presentation of the rock music that I find very enjoyable. I love the chorus work on here. It's very catchy. It's very singable in that sense. It leaves you with the flavor after the song is gone. And Numb reminds me of a Spock's Beer track from the Brief Nocturnes era that was on the bonus disc. And I think it was Dave's not here, or you're not here, or somebody here is missing, or something along those lines. It's just the rhythm section that really heavy, deep drums that it has on there with this really amazing and infectious bass line. Because of that, like, on the one hand, I really enjoy it because that's one of my favorite tracks off of that album. But on the other hand, I keep wanting just to go to listen to that track. But the thing that I do enjoy is, again, how dark and menacing the sounds are, even though it's very fun and very poppy. You know, it's got that teeth that I really like with this kind of expression. The album starts to take a little bit of a dip with Heathens. I think it's how you pronounce it, the third track. It just reminds me of kind of like regular old dad rock at this point, you know, like it's not really adding anything new. It's fun, but it kind of reminds me of like an aging rocker that's just trying to hang on to that fun aspect of like, well, you kids these days don't know how to have fun, and I'm going to show you how the real rock is done. You know? And so that's kind of what I'm feeling with that one. And unfortunately, all the momentum that we had garnered from those first two tracks, we're starting to get a little bit of a waver, and then we kind of run into a brick wall within Mexico. That's funny and sad. Like it's kind of being billed as a somber kind of rock ballad. I'm getting like feels of like Axl Rose in terms of the song, like the vocal works. And I don't necessarily mean that as a compliment. It's a little bit of a dud in my sense. And that same kind of momentum, that same kind of lifelessness is found in the next track of Birds of Prey that I'm not all that excited for. It isn't until like Flying Monkeys and Sick Riff it starts to pick up again. It's a little bit more quirky. We have a little bit more of a dynamics within the sounds. We're trying a little bit more fun aspects on there. I really like, as I mentioned, the quirk aspect of these two tracks. Unfortunately, after Sick Riff, the album goes into a wasteland where there's really nothing left. They're all variations of the same kind of thing. The Depths, Beneath the Waves, Sweet Eliza, 9981 Darkness, Feels Just Like Love. All of these tracks are basically just your generic rock ballad with variations of darkness, of a little bit of quirk here and there, but really they don't differentiate themselves as being anything unique in and amongst themselves. What I would recommend Jason do is take these handful of tracks, maybe clump them all into maybe 2 tracks, taking the best pieces of each, because honestly, that's what they are, you know? It isn't until we get to Bare Sedatives that it starts to pick up again. You know, I start to pay attention a little bit more. And Deep Blue kind of captures my attention even further to at least a little bit of a satisfying ending. The energy is back up. The energy is back. We've got that quirky aspect that I really enjoyed from the first handful of tracks for this album. And the album ends with a fine kind of play out of the human head. But yeah, unfortunately, in the end, to say that this album bored me would be a little bit of a overstatement. You know, it didn't necessarily overbore me, but it didn't capture my attention after the promise of those first 2 tracks of Bombay and Numb. Those tracks are brilliant and beautiful, and I really do recommend you checking those out, as well as Flying Monkeys and Sick Riff. You know, those 4 tracks really are the star performance on this, and you can see what Jason's kind of laying down in terms of the ideas that he's got in his head. I think my main criticism of this is that this album is far, far too long. Way too long. It's 1 hour and 13 minutes, and this album could have easily have been 40 minutes, and we wouldn't have lost a single thing. But when this album hits, as I mentioned, it hits really hard. The rest of the album, I think you can leave to the wayside, if I'm being honest. So yeah, I would say in the end, Postcards from the Asylum by Jason Bieler and the Baron von Bielski Orchestra is one I would ultimately stream. And that's essentially what I would do. You know, I would take those songs that I like, put those into playlists, even though I'm not a big fan of playlists, and then kind of leave the rest over to the wayside, you know? So that's kind of where I'm at for this album. Yeah, and I think that's where I'm going to leave it. What did you guys think about this album? Did you love it? Did you hate it? Whatever you thought, please let me know by commenting down below. And that's all I got for you guys today. So thank you all so much for watching. As always, you guys are definitely the best. And until next time, notes out.